the irrigation demand very varied.
Oh yeah, we've been in for what the climate scientists tell us, a pretty neutral phase. A little bit of it sort of developed a little bit into a little bit of a La Nina before Christmas, but nothing very powerful. And so we've been in this sort of pretty neutral phase. And if you look across New Zealand, there are unbelievable extremes. Like if you take Hawke's Bay, for example, particularly the area probably north of about Waipukurau, Waipawa, maybe a little bit further north, Otani, but then go up the east coast through Gisborne. For example, at our office in Hastings, we haven't, our staff person there hasn't tipped out a drop of rain for January.
Oops.
Nothing. December was really low, and they're getting 30, 35 degree temperatures on a relatively consistent basis, so their irrigation demand is extremely high. You go south of there and the irrigation demand is much less, so once you get further south and into sort of southern Hawke's Bay and parts of the Wairarapa, it's quite different. You go across the divide and get into the Manawatu and Oakuni areas. Well, at one stage 2 weeks ago, they had water running out of potato paddocks because they got 70 millimetres in about 48 hours. So an absolute contrast. And even through Canterbury, there's a massive contrast through Canterbury. We have clients in that South Canterbury, sort of North Otago area, that have irrigated once this season.
Just once.
And if you come further north, particularly once you get north of Christchurch, there's the rainfalls that have been falling in sort of south of the Rakaia River aren't making it further north. For example, a week or two ago there was 30 or 40 millimetres south of the Rakaia and 10 to 12 millimetres north of the Rakaia and a little bit less north of the Waimakariri. So we have these very big contrasts and in small pockets throughout New Zealand. So the demand has been quite different. If you go through the Bay of Plenty and Waikato, there are parts there that again have seen very little rainfall. Paddocks are literally brown, virtually nothing growing. You go into the area around sort of the Whakatane area through to Tauranga. They're busy feeding out and buying feed in to be able to keep milking. So quite big contrasts in quite small areas, because then once you get to sort of that northern Waikato area and near Auckland, they've been getting these westerly rainfalls, and so they've been lucky. And yet Northland's been getting nothing.
It's astounding for a country our size, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the sort of thing you would expect to see on a continental scale,
Yeah.
but it's occurring on a real micro scale this year through New Zealand, yes.
So what are the reserves like?
Well, in the Waikato and the Hawke's Bay area, I mean, we've got river restrictions. So takes from the rivers, or those that are connected to the rivers, they're like the Ngātaroa and the Tukituki rivers. They're on restriction. Groundwater's hanging in there for them, which is fortunate. If you get into the Waikato area, those that do have some irrigation are able to irrigate. They're okay, but of course, if you don't have irrigation, then you're a long way up the deep end. If you get into the Canterbury area, for example, the groundwater's actually hanging in there quite nicely. I mean, it was not looking that flash when we last interviewed back in December. We had people that were struggling to get their permitted take. They're still in that sort of position, but they're still able to carry on irrigating. So we haven't had any further decline really in that groundwater system. And the big rivers have been, they've been in the problem with those big rivers is that they've been in flood so often that they can't actually take water, because the intake, once you get high sediment in the rivers, then you're not taking that water to irrigate with. So they've been pretty good for the most part. So the reserves are sort of hanging in there to get us through this far through the season at least.
Because we must be getting to the end as far as cropping is concerned.
Yeah, things are running late. If you look at some of those early ryegrasses, for example, that you would normally see harvested around that Boxing Day up to that first week of January, they didn't really get cut until well into the first week of January, and didn't get harvested until the second week of January. So we're running a little bit late with those, but there's always a silver lining, of course, because as those crops and those cereal crops are able to mature at a much slower rate, then the quality, the seed and the seed size and the grain size of those crops is much better, because they're not getting forced through their growth stages by week in, week out hot, dry weather and temperatures above what they like to operate at.
And of course, we've had a few nor'westers around, being quietly sort of vague about the fact it's been constant.
Yeah, we have had a few nor'westers around, but if you think about it, I mean, you know, it's only, if you take Canterbury, for example, it's only a week ago that we had a 30mm rainfall. You know, it was Sunday week ago that we had a 30mm rainfall. So while we've had those northwesterlies, we've also had some rainfall events that have helped us just not break the back, but give us a little bit of respite.
Which is what we wanted, Tony. Thank you very much indeed.